Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Realcom Live. I'm going to get back into the habit I started last year on trying to name or give a couple words to the episode, just to kind of sum it up. And I'd say today's conversation is critical. And while some of you may not really understand why a real estate tech conversation would involve understanding the financial status of the market, um, I believe it does. And I'll go all the way back to 1990 when I was a CIO at a real estate company. And when things were going good and money was flowing, projects were easy to get approved and companies were willing to take risks. And all of a sudden, when we turned that corner and financing got tight in the market, meaning deals weren't closing, leases were getting canceled, properties weren't worth as much as we thought they were, that spirit, that sentiment made its way down to my budget. And so if we all know the last couple of years have been interesting. We've been kind of going through this market, and something this morning, just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Um, Ian, if you could bring that up, it said that the Mortgage Bankers Association is saying that their estimate is 659 billion, may actually be 929 billion of debt maturing in 2024. And so, if that is the case, we're in for some rough times because those loans were taken out at higher values with better interest rates. And when they're trying to refinance a property at higher interest rates with less value, it causes tension, it causes stress, and it could impact a firm's position on how innovative they want to be. And what we in the industry say is you go from innovation to maintenance. So, like all of you, we read these articles in the local pubs online, and today we're going to try to go a little deeper with somebody who really knows what they're talking. Somebody who's got a command of the data, has the data in front of them, has been analyzing it, and is going to try to set us on a good course to understand how turbulent it could or could not be in 2024. Therefore, impacting or not impacting tech innovation budgets. So with that, I'd like to bring Stephen on. Stephen Buschbom with the Director of Research for Trepp. Stephen, so nice to have you. We've been having a lot of conversation. And I love data, have always loved data, have used data to predict things in 1990 and again in 2008. And our conversations leading up today in prep have been fascinating. At your fingertips, at your keyboard, you've got access to all the data we need to understand where we are. And hopefully, in 20, 25 minutes, we're going to let the audience understand a little better on what 2024 might mean financially to the market and therefore our capacity to invest in technology and innovation. So with that being said, why don't you give us a little idea of your background, even possibly before Trepp? When did you get interested in data and the stories it could tell you?
Sure. So I'm going to go back to more or less at the beginning. I graduated from University of Georgia from their real estate program, and I'll call it the first job. It was actually the second job I took out of college was with ING Investment Management. That's now Voya Investment Management in their portfolio management and analytics. So basically doing risk management, reporting, re-underwriting of loans. And I did that for the first 3 years. And I started in 2006. So the first 3 years was taking me into 2008. And then when everything blew up with Lehman Brothers, AIG, Bear Stearns, et cetera, we realized that we had a lot of mortgage-backed security exposure, both on the residential side, but also importantly on the commercial side. So I actually got transitioned to the CMBS desk there for the second half of my stint.
In what year was this, 08 or 07?
2008 was when I made the transition. So from 2009 to 2012, wow. I got moved to the CMBS desk. And it turns out I did a lot of digging on the Bloomberg terminal and found out that our company actually had the most exposure to junior mezzanine tranche CMBS bonds of anybody in the world. Because to give you a little bit of inside baseball, ING was doing a similar business plan to what AIG was doing. And we call that the spread lending game, where you'd take AAA assets, swap them fixed to float. You'd be on the receiving end, so you'd reinvest the proceeds. And by and large, a lot of the mezzanine bonds were still going to be money good, but the stress that got put on the balance sheet as a result of those swaps and deterioration in credit ratings and loan performance was just like a complete shock. And so we had to very quickly get our arms around the data. So I went from knowing nothing about CMBS to having to become as much of an expert as I possibly could.
When you first put your hands on the keyboard and started downloading that data into your Excel or data access database, whatever tool you used, do you remember that aha moment when you did the query group sort that you said, "Uh-oh"?
I can tell you, so one of the best aha moments, because it was a colleague of myself, they got taken from the commercial mortgage whole loan team. So we were making loans to individual borrowers for the balance sheet of the investment management or insurance companies. We were investing on behalf of the insurance companies. So we had a very traditional commercial real estate upbringing. And so we both got thrown into the CMBS world. And what we realized early on in the 2008 fallout was that there were a lot of 5-year loans that were going to be coming due that weren't going to be able to pay off. And so we put on a trade that was taking advantage of that stress in the market, because these loans were paying about a 5.5% coupon, and the current interest rate environment was 3 to 4%. And so we thought, well, with these bonds trading at a premium, if we go in there and buy the right bonds and they end up extending, we might look like we're buying a 3 to 4% yield. But if that cash flow gets extended, we start collecting that 5.5% coupon.
Right.
And this is like a no-brainer trade for us. And so we went from that trade to looking at seasoned credit to then looking at more recent vintage credit. So it was kind of a fun exercise.
So when you finally realized that this was going to be big, was it before we all saw it on television, or was it when we saw it on television? When did you realize things were getting pretty ugly?
I would say that the moment when I knew it was going to be pretty bad was when the head of the commercial mortgage group really kind of started having a panic moment. And he was calling upstairs to find out exactly how much of these mortgage-backed securities we had exposure
What
to.
month of 2008 was that?
Ooh, I would say that was late. It was actually 07, and it
Okay,
was,
okay, a year before the.
yeah,
So a year before the pack. So you didn't have to convince your executives; they started realizing this thing was going to get ugly.
the stress was there. And then once we got into, and I remember this very distinctly, the fall of 2007, we were having discussions about, exactly what was happening in residential credit. And somebody said, there's no way you can get a 100% LTV residential loan for under 7%. And I just kind of laughed. I was like, well, it's funny because I just got quoted one. That must be one of the last ones that'll, ever get quoted like that. And it just kind of like slapped me across the face to think, my gosh, like what exactly is going on, and what's the magnitude?
And I don't want to go too deep in the woods because I want to get to the ultimate conversation about how this impacts operations of a business. But I got one other question as it relates to 2008. Any of that paper still on the books?
There is, believe it or not, there are some loans that are still stuck around. It might only be 1 or 2 loans left in a 2007 vintage deal that are now real estate owned. So they've been foreclosed. The lender holds title, and they're just trying to maximize recovery proceeds. But that still might be a very negative outcome in terms of.
So that's 15 years of extend and pretend, kick the can, staying alive, right? I mean, all these little.
It's amazing.
Phrase. And again, I went through the 90 cycle, which was insanely efficient.
Mm-hmm.
By 91, the RTC was formed, Resolution Trust Corporation, all the assets were dumped into it. They marked them to market, which was 10 cents on a dollar, 25 cents on a dollar kind of thing. People came in, knew what they were getting into, had a base that was affordable, reinvested, into the properties. And by 95, they were doing well. Right. And that was a 5-year process maybe. And now we're 15 years and you're telling me there's still loans from 08. And here we have 2024 with 659 billion, possibly coming due this year. So any parallels, any guttural, feelings of what you experienced in 07 to what the headlines you're reading today? Are there any parallels whatsoever?
There are, in terms of the level of uncertainty, and we call it kicking the can down the road. Is that's the strategy? Well, we don't know exactly what this loan might sell for if we were to liquidate it, and ultimately we don't want to take a high loss severity if we think things will be on the mends 2-3 years from now. So that part of the game is ringing, very, very similar. However, the big difference is going into '08, it was very much an over leverage underwriting, credits type problem we had. Today, it's more or less rates centric. I would say the underwriting has been much, much more disciplined. You always tend to have that, I would say, over leverage or optimistic underwriting in the fringes of the market, but it's been much more disciplined this time around.
But the rates seem to not be going in the direction people want because inflation continues, and that there's still so much cash in the system that as a result of quantitative easing, printing presses, if you will, since '09. So that's 15 years, right? And so getting that excess cash out of the system could be pretty painful.
It certainly seems like it will be painful, and I'd be shocked if it wasn't, quite honestly.
So we now know what 23 looked like. Was that the peak of the bad debt situation, or was that the first, second inning? I mean, what inning are we in this thing?
I would say we're maybe in the fourth, fifth inning. We haven't quite reached the halfway point. I think 2024 might ultimately prove to be the halfway point. We were writing about this in one of our daily newsletters that we put out at Trepp called The Rundown, which is free to subscribe to. And so my good buddy Arrest, that was writing the intro to The Rundown yesterday, wrote about the fear greed index. And so what I would say is, to tell you where we've come from 2023, fear was keeping a lot of money on the sidelines. Bid-ask spreads were wide, and there wasn't any transaction volume. And then all of a sudden, at the end of 2023, in December and into January, we've seen a flurry of activity. And if we look, say, at CMBS issuance, we've had roughly a little over $7 billion in issuance in the conduit, large loan, and single asset, single borrower space this year. Versus at the same point last year, it was roughly half that.
Okay.
So things have come back. It seems like we're starting to transition to that greed phase where you will see transactions materialize, but make no mistake, there's still a very large bid-ask spread.
So many of the buildings that we've been dealing with over the last 25 years find themselves in major urban areas, right? And those areas, in addition to this financial debt issue, they've got the work from home experiment caused by COVID, which is still leaving people unsure as to what the return to work looks like. Then you've got the sustainability net zero carbon push, which is suggesting to keep people off of freeways and out of cars, right? 2-hour commutes. And then you've got, of course, crime, which we're starting to see, poke its head into major metropolitan areas. Does that extend this conversation? Does this impact this conversation as far as, rent rolls and income, and as it relates to, it's kind of like the mother of all storms, because you've got income pressure and you've got debt pressure. So your expenses are rising and your income is going the wrong direction. What are you seeing with these other factors that are playing into valuing, current value of a building?
It really muddies the water. It makes it very, very difficult to gain conviction around. Let's just think of like a very simple case. If I were to give you, say, an urban office property today and ask you to create a 10-year pro forma for the financials, could we even get past year 3 or 5 before we just kind of throw our hands up in there and say, I have no idea,
right?
And that's how I feel about it is, if we think how long could this play out when we stabilize, it's really difficult to wrap your arms around when you have things like, say, AI happening in the background that, could.
I didn't even mention it, but I should have. Absolutely. Because there are people that are saying that, one rack of computers in some data center, in the middle of the desert or near a lake for cooling, can do the work of 100 people or 100 seats, right? And so that's if you were to do a diagram of saying everything impacting this real estate market and the uncertainty, it's a big jigsaw puzzle.
It really is. And I think back to one of the comments that was made, going back to my boss at ING. He said, I think we're going to see a lost decade of interest rates. And at the time, I just kind of laughed. I was like, oh, Maurice is always the the pessimist, he's the perpetual bear. And then, hot dang, if that didn't turn out to be right. And so I think, right now, some of the comments that I hear being made about, it's going to take years to work through this stress, kind of similar to what happened with regional malls.
Right.
So many of those assets are still getting worked through. And we've really haven't found, ultimately, I think we maybe have found the floor on a lot of these assets, but we haven't figured out the adaptive reuse
The
yet.
adaptive reuse yet, exactly. Well, I mean, we've seen the apartment buildings go up next to the mall. We've seen, gymnasiums and health centers and other uses, but I don't think that journey's done either. And P.S. Most of the people I talk to, where I have this conversation with them, I say, "Is this a typical 10-year cycle or a paradigm shift?" Almost to the number, they're saying paradigm shift. So,
Yes.
in addition to all the technical financial issues we're dealing with, which we have seen before, we've got this paradigm shift of work from home, which was caused by a pandemic, which is creating this technical obsolescence or functional obsolescence of these buildings that not everybody's got figured out, right?
That's right.
One more question before we go to break, and then we're going to come back and talk about how technology can solve some of these problems. If you were to throw your dart, what year do we see stabilization? Like, okay, we found our footing, we found the ground. This is 2024. What year do you think we see the floor?
I'm gonna lob that dart and say, on the longer end, 2028, 2026 would be the earliest I could see right now that happening. But 2028 feels
So
realistic.
we'll take the average. We'll say 2027. So that's 3 years from now.
Yeah, and that still seems kind of aggressive, given if it's a paradigm shift.
That could be even longer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting, 90, we said stay alive till 95. And then, about a year and a half ago, I started hearing stay alive till 25. I go, kind of think I've heard this before, but a lot of people that I'm talking to as well, are saying 25, 26, 27. A couple people have said 28. I think 26, 27 is not a stretch.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect segue to our next conversation, which we'll have after the break. Is how do you manage operations, knowing that your budgets might be constrained? You can't stop innovating. Technology is going to play a role in these buildings. They're not going to want to come back to the cube farm of pre-pandemic days. They're going to want immersive experiences. They're going to want safe experiences. They're going to want broadband that works, cell phones that work. I can go down the list of technologies that are going to have to be put into this building before people are going to come back and really have that modern experience they're looking for. So let's hear from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. Great conversation.
Thin micro BMS makes less complex buildings smart, comfortable, and efficient. It delivers an integrated and customizable building management system in a fast and affordable way, and can manage a range of disciplines such as HVAC, lighting, energy, and refrigeration, along with scheduling, alarming, trending, and reporting applications. Its simple monitoring and controlling complies with energy efficiency regulations such as EPBD, with plug-and-play engineering and strong integration through open protocols and templating. It's suitable for single or multiple sites. Finn's Edge 2 cloud technology provides secure remote access for management and data collection. Discover more about all of our app suites at j2in.com.
All right, Stephen, I know technology is not necessarily your forte, but I think you look at enough operating budgets and understand what it takes to run a real estate asset that I think you'll have some good insight on this. So before the break, I mentioned a few, but let's just think about it. Today's modern workplace, your cell phone needs to work. Okay. In today's modern workplace, you need Wi-Fi. You need efficient maintenance and operations, meaning you can't have 4 truck rolls to fix the chiller. You should do it in one, which means that chiller's got to be connected to some type of network. You can bring down your operating costs by taking a serious look at energy consumption and how you're doing it, right? I mean, is there low voltage in any of your building? Or are you still relying on that, AC clunky architecture of 100 years or 75 years, whatever? From your perspective, when you're looking at the way some of these companies are being run, Are you seeing a serious look at technology as a way out, as a tool out, or are those conversations, are your conversations strictly financial and technical?
So a lot of our conversations are structural, technical, looking generally at the operating expense numbers, not digging too much beneath that to the technology that might be giving you an efficiency advantage. But that being said, that's something we always keep our ear to the ground on, because we need to know what's happening with technological innovations, trends in the marketplace, and what building owners or operators are doing to try and stay competitive or counterbalance some of the expense load trends that we see in the data. So to give you just an example of one item that has come up in conversation so many times over the last, I'd say 18 months is insurance. So the fact that you're seeing insurance now even enter into the discussion when in the past it was, well, it should only be about 3% of your operating expense budget, and we're just going to grow that at 3%. Throw that out the window. It's doubled over the last 5 years, and you're seeing deals fall apart at the closing table because either you can't get coverage, or it's the coverage that you can get, the cost is 50% higher than what it was 2 years ago.
Right.
So yeah.
So I was in Florida, in Tampa, last couple of days, and had a phenomenal meeting with a senior real estate executive, not a senior technology executive, but a senior real estate executive. And he brought me into their leasing room, if you will. And he had the most stunning 3D model of the entire city of Tampa, much like I saw in Singapore, Shanghai, and Korea when we traveled Asia. And then he had a Real Engine, which is a gaming software platform, juxtaposed on top of this model of the city. So they kind of superimposed the windows and the color of the building. So you literally saw a 3D representation. At one point I said, is this like physical and digital? I can't figure it out. And he turned off the lights. He goes, no, it's both. And I go, wow, that was some crazy magic. And I said to him, and he goes, well, watch this. And he clicked the button. He said, okay, here's our project, blue. Here's the occupancy, blue. Here's the different developers. And I said, can you like take CoStar data in and present it on this model? He goes, oh yeah, I'll open API. I was blown away. Okay, but here's the most important thing he said, or one of the most important things he said. I said, how's been your return on investment on this technology? And he said, off the charts. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, bringing people in here, communicating complex things. He had all the data statistics of the city that you would normally be handed a manila folder. They were all right there. You could click on them and go deeper. You could intentionally leave this room with every question answered. And he goes, that meant shorter deal spans, better deal spans, more transparency, more accurate data. And PS, if you're that innovative on the front end, we trust that you're running the back end really well. You're not wasting energy. You're turning off the lights. I'll tell you, it was a wonderful experience. And by the way, we're going to be talking about this company and this project a lot at our conference in June. So I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm biased, but I don't think you get out of this after the technical issues get resolved. I don't think you get out of this without a significant investment in technology. But there is the rub, building valued less, debt, too much debt, tightening the belt. Where do you find the money you need to make this building modern again?
Yes. Yeah. So at Trepp, we've always been known for our data quality and depth of data, whether it's from the CMBS bonds down to the operating expense data that we collect. And we recently engaged in a project to basically make it easier to connect data sets. So the service is called Trepp Connect, where we generate a unique identifier at the property level so that, say, if you have a portfolio of assets in a city, let's take New York, and the open data that you can get from the city of New York for energy benchmarking could really help you out in understanding your competitive advantage or what you could be improving on. But when it comes to actually, mapping your assets to the data that is in that database, do you want to do that by hand? Because we all know
and that's a great story, because anecdotally, I've been told that during the pandemic, when the buildings were basically empty, the energy consumption stayed the same. Right. And you would think,
right.
Okay, nobody's there. You turn off the lights, but then you get into complications of leases, what it takes to create an operating environment that your tenant can come to, i.e. heating, air conditioning, lighting. It's complicated, but if the technology infrastructure was there in the whole city where you could at least see who was in the building and maybe shut off the 28th through the 60th floor because nobody was there, we could have made a dent.
That's right.
So
That's right.
so I think it's going to be very turbulent. Let's call it to 2027. But for those leaders who understand technology's strategic implications, lean into it carefully, selectively, no hype, no FOMO here. I think there's going to be some real winners who come out of this thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because
Real
tenants, on the insurance, example, just to lean into that a little bit more, the tenants themselves, if you're on a triple net lease and you're having to pay the expenses, you care a lot lot about building
Care a lot
efficiency.
about it. You care a lot
That's
about it.
in a world of cost control and downsizing your footprint, you now have the option to relocate. So
In PS, if you show an insurance company that you're using technology to protect you from cyber breaches, to protect you from accidents, for incident response, I mean, there are 100 applications where technology can provide a better, safer, more enjoyable, a better managed asset. Maybe you can go back to that negotiating table and show them, and it shouldn't be 6%; it should be 3%.
that's right.
Well, we obviously went over. I don't care. This was such a great conversation. We are going to continue this over the next 4 months, and we're going to continue to refine this. And I'm really hoping to get you to the conference in June, because I think your message and the data that we uncover in the next few months will be valuable to all the technology people who have to build budgets for 24, 25, and beyond to understand where this market is going to take them. So, Stephen, thank you so much for your hard work and for sharing it with our audience today.
Thank you, Jim. Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day. Be well. All right. Well, unbelievable conversation. And I think we could have went on 2 hours. But we're going to get to one of my favorite parts of Realcomm Live, and that's the news. And I think we got another Howard stand-in. I don't think it's Lisa. I think it might be Nancy. There she is.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Howard,
Is Howard ever coming back?
Yeah, well, he was in Sydney, which at an incredible event with a bunch of CIOs and technology professionals there. Lisa and I actually poked into his meeting this week, and they were just having a great time. And so I think he is back now, though. So
Yeah. Well, it's having such a great time. Who knows if we'll ever get him back.
So I'll get out of your way, let you do the news, and I'll be back in a few minutes.
All righty. Well, happy to fill in for Howard. Here's a quick recap of a few of the articles for this week's news brief, which is published every Thursday morning. If you haven't received it in your inbox, click the news link at the top of our website to read the latest issues and to sign up. Our first article is a top-of-mind concern for businesses worldwide. It was disclosed this week that scammers reportedly swindled approximately $25 million from a multinational company's Hong Kong branch using deepfake technology. The fraud began with an employee in the finance department receiving a message purportedly from the company's UK-based CFO, leading to a video call involving the CFO and other employees, all later revealed to be deepfakes. Following instructions from the fraudulent call, the employee transferred $25.6 million across 15 transactions to various Hong Kong bank accounts. It took a week before the company realized the deception. You may also have heard of the recent deepfake video incident targeting celebrity Taylor Swift. These scams underscore the rising threat posed by the nefarious uses of this technology and highlights growing concerns and calls for legislative action by Congress. Next up, the Wall Street Journal reports that Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, is asking foreign investors and governments for up to $7 trillion. The article delves into Altman's efforts to secure funding for developing custom hardware tailored to optimize the performance of AI systems. Altman believes that specialized chips could revolutionize AI capabilities and efficiency. While specific details about the investors and the timeline remain undisclosed, OpenAI's pursuit underscores the critical role of hardware in advancing AI innovation. The landscape surrounding hardware development is pretty competitive already, with established players like NVIDIA and Intel investing heavily in this space. OpenAI's entry into the chip development arena adds a new dimension to the competition, potentially disrupting the market dynamics and driving further innovation. So, what does this mean to the commercial real estate industry? Well, among other things, the investment will pay for the infrastructure to support Altman's ambitious plans, and building out that infrastructure could have real implications for CRE, considering the office space and data centers needed to house expanded operations. Altman posted, "We believe the world needs more AI infrastructure, fab capacity, energy, data centers, etc., than people are currently planning to build. Building massive scale AI infrastructure and a resilient supply chain is critical to economic competitiveness. OpenAI will try to help." We shall see. And then lastly, Microsoft has expanded its cloud for sustainability with new data and AI capabilities to aid customers in measuring, reducing, and reporting environmental impacts. The enhancements include sustainability-focused data services in Microsoft Fabric and an AI model integrated into the Copilot tool for improved insights in the Microsoft Sustainability Manager platform. These features enable organizations to transform environmental and social data into analytics, aiding in regulatory reporting and decision making. Specifically, the AI model helps identify emissions reductions, opportunities, and anomalies, providing critical insight for managing ESG data efficiently. Microsoft's holistic approach now covers carbon emissions, water, and waste management, offering a comprehensive view of sustainability's impact. And that's it for this week. We'll take it back to you, Jim.
All right. Well, a quick comment on all three. Yet another cybersecurity issue that we're going to have to deal with. If you ask me what inning we're in, we haven't even gotten on the bus to the park yet, because cybersecurity combined with AI is just opening up a whole new realm. And can you imagine if I did not know that I was really talking to you on this, and that the deep fake was so good that some other voice off the camera was using your face, your video, your actions, and putting words into your mouth? I mean, we're going to be going into this deep at the conference and the cyber forum and other places, because it's a big deal.
These were on camera, camera
live,
to other employees.
Live.
Totally convincing.
Totally convincing. All right. And they said they were a little nervous, but it was so convincing on the video that they, said it's got to be true. On the Sam Altman thing, I read the book, Chip Wars, would recommend it to everybody. Great book. It clearly shows the last 40 years, where they were, where they've been developed, where they went, where they are now, what needs to be done. It's a relatively easy read. Anybody in the tech space should read it, because it gives you context. And last but not least, Microsoft injects AI into, the sustainability data, ESG. Microsoft's injecting AI into everything. In fact, when I describe our next week's guest, and we are wrapping our arms around Microsoft and all the implications of Copilot and all the other Microsoft products, because AI is complicated. You just can't push a button and the magic happens. You have to have a strategy. You have to have data governance. You have to have good, clean data. It needs to constantly be updated. So these stories are spot on, and hopefully people take the time to read them.
And they're impacting everything within an organization.
Well,
it's not just hardware, it's all software related.
You need to be dealing with 10 things at once. You're juggling 10 major things at once. And I'm starting to feel and hear a lot of that stress in organizations saying, how do we keep up with this? And that's what we've been trying to do is, we're out there digging and trying to organize and make sense for some of these topics. It's not just that AI is cool. It's like, okay, be specific. Show me exactly why AI is cool. Show me the weaknesses and the strengths to help me with my strategy. So,
yeah.
All
Reminds me of when the PC came out.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Revolutionized everything we did.
And then the internet, right?
This is that big.
Yeah. Some people are saying it's actually bigger than the internet, which very well could be. All right. Well, listen,
thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Howard's back next week.
I think he's back, but thank you for filling. I appreciate it. All right. Before I close out and talk about our next week's guest, let's hear from our final sponsor, and I'll be right back.
To invest millions in today's market, your deal team can't rely on emails, spreadsheets, and physical documents. Let's go from offline to online and make data your competitive advantage with DealPath. As your command center, DealPath streamlines deal flow from pipeline to portfolio management, empowering you to realize operational efficiencies, grow top line, and uncover the most profitable opportunities. Built by real estate experts, chosen by market leaders. The industry's most trusted real estate deal management platform, DealPath.
All right. So keeping on the AI theme, next week's guest, just a phenomenal guy, smart, hardworking, is going to be coming in and talking about what? None other than AI. So we've been doing an awful lot of work on AI, trying to dig deep, starting all the way from last year's conference, going into Buildings AI in the fall, our AI advisory group, monthly meetings. I mean, this is not an easy topic to understand. Kind of some big bucket areas that we're starting to see develop is AI can be applied to the front end, the smart building, the back end, the operations, and then also the productivity stack, which means how are your workers using AI on a daily basis inside of a real estate company? Not necessarily the accounting or the lease administration systems, which will take that data and play around with it, but really how are you running the business? Well, Joseph gave us a demo a couple weeks ago about how he runs his day and his team and his company. And I will tell you, this guy's on fire. You are not going to want to miss this. He's going to give us a little demo, and we're excited to have him and continue this this discussion of AI and all other interesting topics. So with that, I say thank you very much. Have a great day. Be well, and we will see you next week on Realcom Live.